So the very start here, still playing first turn of Europa Universalis, of the diplomatic phase, is an interplayer negotiations where you can kind of talk to people, try to get a feel for things. And then you can declare war on different countries. In this case, only one country is declaring war, and that's Turkey is declaring war on the Mamluks. And that costs them 2 stability. That's a painful thing to have happen. I've got to roll now to see who the Mamluks associate with. It's probably Venice. I don't know if it's not really rolled. You go down a list and see who gets it. I think it's going to be Venice that gets to control them, which is good because Venice has the most stake in them right now. Other countries did consider war, in particular France, who wants Calais badly. However, France also wants to conduct some negotiation on Scotland and see if they can bring them into the war, maybe build up some troops and prepare for that. The danger here is they may end up in a war with Spain, and that may make it difficult for them to take Calais easily. Such is the nature of things. No one else is really involved in a war yet, though there's the possibility that if the Mamluks are at war with Turkey, Venice could enter that war. Well, the Mamluks are at war with Turkey. No one else really wanted to join a war. Spain considered an alliance with England, but thought, honestly, if France goes to war with England, let them. I don't want to get involved in a war on this first turn because the Italian wars are a sort of a different beast. They're a limited war in Italy itself, which is actually why that Artois victory condition for France, which is no longer part of the game with the Risto rules events, is kind of a bad choice because France actually can't use the Italian wars to gain it. They want it. If Calais were part of France, and I kind of thought it was, but it's not, France would get a cheaper declaration of war with only one stability cost. I thought Turkey got a cheaper declaration on the Mamluks, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Anyway, I'll set them up, and then I'll conduct miners' diplomacy, and I'll come back. Forget about that. Turkey's not going to war yet. Big reason why, I thought about it, they don't want to face having to get Damascus in as short a time as this bad weather turn may be. So they're going to hold off for a turn as well. This is going to be a turn where not much happens, largely because of that weather effect. I started looking and thinking about it, and I said, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to fight this battle out at this point. So, the question remains whether or not they want to declare war on the Knights, who don't have a very big fortress right now and could be taken out fairly easily, perhaps. Problem? Well, problem is I don't have troops here in Thrace to land. I didn't set up with this intention. Didn't really think about it. So I think I'm just going to hold on that. I'm just going to buy some diplomacy. In this case, seeing France and maybe Venice interested in expanding their diplomatic holdings. Venice's poor stability means that they don't have a lot of money right now. Their situation is kind of unpleasant for them. This is one of the reasons Turkey wanted to act this early, but the bad weather definitely puts a crimp on them. So instead what we're seeing is France is going to make diplomatic actions against both Scotland and the papacy. They've recorded that they're spending $60 on this, and I should kind of have a minus for things that are minus just to help me watch when I do all that paperwork. Okay, but here's the thing. $30 on each of them. Is a maximum size? No, it's a minimum. It's a medium. Oh no. I'm sorry. All right, they'll spend $100 for a medium investment in each. They want to gain, and that's how much money they have on hand. It's a painful situation, but they want to get these things into play. So that's going to give them a +2 on the table. Now, in each case, and this is the case with everything in this game, you kind of got to look things up all over the place. Now, one place you can look things up is over on the counters themselves. For example, Scotland, France has a +1 to their die roll. And we can see the direct effects of the investment. But England has the option now, even though they didn't spend anything, to spend in defense. And we're going to do that. So I'm not going to touch the Spanish one in this detail, but England has also spent 50 bucks. That's all the money they have. That cancels out France's bonus. Now, because this is a controlled power, it's going to be a competitive die roll. They each roll 1 10-sider. If it was against a neutral, which it would have been if England wasn't throwing any money in. If England didn't throw money in, they'd lose their vassal entirely and end up with France just rolling against 2 dice for the neutral, which is still difficult, and that's one of the issues here. Now, in the case here, let's see what the modifiers are. We got them all listed somewhere. Dip value of monarch. Okay. Well, let's see what we got. France is a 6. England's a 5. So right now France is at +1. And I'll mark that here. I lost them again. Investment, same religion. Both have the same religion. Nobody's supporting this action. People could throw 20 bucks in and say, I'm willing to help France with this. We might see that in some of the other actions, so I'm not sure. Different religions at war. Player bonus. Well, France gets a +1 because over on the Scotland counter, or here in the book, it's going to tell you that they have this advantage towards that country. But it's in the vacillation marker for the English, so they get +3. And that's all there is. So the net effect is an English +1. We make a quick roll, and the English gain 1. Now, I'm not sure whether or not they could gain a space off of this, but the cost for vacillation up to annexation is non-existent for Scotland. They can only be annexed outright by an event. Some countries will allow themselves to be diplomatically annexed, and they pay a progression cost. If the French had won it, had succeeded, what they would have needed is, I believe, 4 points. They would have had to exceed the English by 4 points to drop it down to entry into war. And from there, it would be 3 points to drop it down to Expeditionary Corps. So it's hard to get something off the other guy's track when it's deep in them. Do the same with the Spaniards and see what happens there. I think they're going to pay an investment as well, since they're interested in the sole defender of the Catholic faith. And the attempt on the papacy also failed. Spain spent 50 bucks to negate. I don't think you can spend more in reaction than your opponent has. I'm not sure what the rules on this really are, but I looked at it. It looks like you see the way it's actually worded. The controlling player did not plan to make an action. He is then allowed to take a reaction action on that minor and must pay the investment required. You may have to pay as much as the enemy exactly in order to get a roll. Okay, anyway, that's what happened, and the Spaniards had a slight bonus from being in the royal marriage box as well as one from their own diplomacy. They rolled more poorly. If they hadn't had those bonuses, it would have actually swung into the French royal marriage box, in which case there are a couple of special effects that happen in 2 of these boxes. Royal marriage and subsidies have very little effect on the game, in general. For the papacy, it's a little different. But royal marriage causes some cash to change hands either from or towards the power that gains the marriage. And likewise, subsidy, which can be a much larger amount and tends to be it tends to be affected by the country. So, for example, the papacy will pay you, or you pay them, $10 when you enter royal marriage. When you hit subsidies, you roll a percentile dice and subtract 10, and that's how much money you gain from getting them into the subsidies box. So, the papacy is a wealthy country. It tends to give you bonuses. Savoy, for example, would give you a penalty. The Mamluks give you a bonus because they're looking for allies. Stuff like that is kind of just factored into those counters. There's a lot of information contained on those counters. It's also all in the annex books, which is an easier way to look at if you're not sitting on top of the diplomatic chart. Okay, so that's where we are. Yeah, we're moving real slow here. And now we're going to just calculate the income and then do the administrative phase. Alright, back for that. So in an actual game of EU, you would probably, each player would be filling out their form, collecting their income, and then filling out the expenses, kind of plotting them. I don't have an easy way to plot the expenses, any easier than you would do in a normal game, which is write them all down and reveal them. That doesn't work as well solitaire because I've got 6 powers to take care of. So I'm going to take that much effort right now to explain how I do it, but then kind of gloss over it from then on and just maybe explain the effects. So I've come up with Spain's money, and they had a big penalty because of their collapse of their economy, essentially, for this turn, where they lost a significant amount of their provincial income. Okay, well, that's great. It ends up they have $271, including the 100 that they had after the diplomacy phase. Now, from that, I counted up my units and saw that they're going to cost $43. I do that over here, and I get a certain basic forces that I get to sustain for free. And then beyond that, I have to pay, let's see, up here, it shows by the era that I'm in the medieval era, how much I have to pay for the different units. Well, I have to sustain an army minus because I have an army plus and I'm only getting a free army minus and 3 detachments. That army minus is going to cost me $8 if it's veteran. I choose to make my entire army conscript level and only pay $4. I'm not at war, so it's no big deal. Next turn I can up that up to a veteran unit. What I can't do is build a new veteran unit. When I build a new unit, it comes out conscript right to begin with. And that's just, you know, a factor there. You may want to maintain conscript in some units when you're at war, but when you're not at war, there's no reason to have veterans unless they're free. At least that's how I see it. I also have to pay for some of my other units, so I look at this and I've got a fleet plus. Well, I have 2 detachments that make up a fleet minus, so I have to pay 2 additional, or a fleet minus worth of detachments, which is going to cost me $24. If I did that as individual detachments, it would cost me $28. I still have a spare detachment, and I have 2 spare squadrons that I have to pay for. One of them I pay for, one of them costs $14. Anyway, it adds up to $43 that I owe to just keep my army. Now, I could, you know, dismantle my army, but I don't want to do that. I think I'm going to be at war. All right, so then I've got my total money left then, which is $271 minus 43. It's $228. I can use that for investments, for building new armies, for stuff like that. I need some money available to move Columbus and go discover America. Turns out I need like maybe $20-30 to do that. If I'm going to do diplomacy next turn, I need more money. So I need to save about $80, I'd say. That's my feel here. It's always good to have at least $50 left when you start a turn because there's a bad event that could cause a bankruptcy, and that's terrible. So once I look at that, I don't have a lot left to spend. I have a little over $100. I would like to improve my economy. I would also like to improve my military abilities so that I can face France if they go to war with me, but I can't do everything at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my FTI, foreign trade investment. I'm going to put $100 into that. That's the first amount that I take. So I'll just subtract that off here. And now I have $128 left. I don't want to spend a lot of that. Now, foreign trade investment, yeah, you got to know a lot of these things. You really have to understand the charts and how everything interacts, just like you have to understand how all the different little country rules interact. And you'll probably forget some. So what? Okay. All right. So in order to do an investment, I take my leader's, sorry, it's the first number here, administrative capability. That's going to be 7. I subtract 9 off that. That puts me to -2. It's a big investment for $100, so it's at +3. So I'm currently at +1 total, and then I get +2 for my stability, because that's where my stability is. So what did I say I'm at? I think +3. So I'm going to roll on the 3 column here. And basically, I need to get a 6 or higher to get an increase. The halves, I don't remember if they work for investments. All right, let's see. I get a 3. That's bad news. I have to look up a rule. Okay, I'll be back after I do that. I'm not sure if that increases it or not. So now here's the problem with the wording. The way the improvement FTI DTI says the results, an S result indicates a success in such a case, blah, blah, blah. Any other result is a failure. Okay, that sounds pretty clear, but when I go elsewhere, they mostly say the same thing. In some cases, they don't say any other result is a failure, but, well, even the commercial fleets do. I think the truth of the matter is that the 1/2 is still applicable. So I have to make a die roll. Here's the problem. Yeah, I think a half is a half success. So if the die roll is equal or inferior to the FTI, well, that's really unlikely. It's hard to bootstrap yourself no matter what. It isn't. So I've wasted $100. That's a big deal. A lot of money. I really wanted this to work. Now, what do I think of next? Well, one thing I could be doing is trying to pump my technology up. That's another tough thing to do. What do I have left? $128. That means I have, say, $40 to invest. That's not a lot. And I'm going to need money next turn. So let's see what else is on this menu that I'd kind of like to do. I have the investment costs here. I could try to improve my stability at the end of the turn. That's generally a good idea, but I'm so low on money, I would rather not do that. Placing trading fleets is very cheap. On the other hand, I could try to increase the technology. I think that's what I'm going to do. That's $50 more for a medium investment. That gives me a +1. I think that gives me enough money left. We'll see. Hopefully I haven't just screwed Spain over. But let's see what that comes up with. A technology. It's a very similar thing. Die roll military of the monarch. That's 8. +1 for medium investment. That puts me to 9. +1 for land technology for every metal manufacturing. I have one of them, so that puts me to 10. And I'm going to need a 12 or more to get a bonus. Okay? We'll try that. Well, I think I got a 13, which is giving me a +1 technology. What that's going to do, and everything here is happening simultaneous, so I have to be careful of the other powers. But what that does is that takes this and bumps it 1. Well, I've hit the Renaissance space, so I jump another space over. If I was the last token here, this would eventually drop down to allow other people to go forward, but right now it doesn't do that. Alright, I've spent my money with Spain. And now really the goal is to write down that 78 bucks over in here, which you can kind of imagine at this point. I'll come back with what the other powers have done. Oh crap, I forgot something. Technology adjustment costs. I just went up in technology. I've got to pay some more money, and I'll look that up. Hopefully it's not enough to bankrupt me. I'm really worried about this actually. But my land units, I have to pay some money to oh no, it's naval units. Still, I have to pay some cash to upgrade those units to the newer technology. Wrong I was. It's not my naval technology that went up. It's my land technology. I don't have to pay anything. I also don't get to bump over the technology marker. But that's great. Okay, onward then. Okay, so I cheated there, and it had no effect when I looked at things. But the column here is die roll modifiers. So actually, I was a couple of columns earlier, but with a die roll modifier in my favor for stability of +2. And that would have still gotten me in the 1/2 table, and I would have still failed. In general, they kind of balance out. It doesn't make much difference which way you do it, but I just wanted to point that out for the purists out there who know the game already. Since then, I've already done a couple other countries. I've handled Portugal and Turkey, both of which have held a lot of money. The Portuguese and the Turks both put military investments into play. Turkey has one further worry beyond other players, where they have these Pasha counters that each cost them some money. They're extra military counters. They actually allow them to have more stacking than they normally would. They can have 2 detachments and a Pasha, I believe, in the same space. Well, no, I'm sorry. 2 full army, 2 regular counters, and a Pasha in this space. The Pasha also counts as a leader, but not a very good one usually. Okay. Anything else happen? The DTI and FTIs for those 2 countries are already at their maximum. A lot of these will have maximums of what you can have on the board. Exceeding those is very dangerous. You can do it on the last turn of a period, though, entering into the next period. But in general, you do not want to exceed your maximums because you have added problems if there's a revolt. All right, onward. All right, so I finished up the economic phase. Kind of painful, but we see at least the technology is very easy to see. Portugal up in the Navy. The Ottomans paid to advance their army. They're now in the next level, which is Renaissance. That means they get firepower nobody else does. They fire on better tables, tremendously better tables, against the Mamluks if they attack them. But here's the problem. They're not fighting this round. Now, luckily for them, the French are still holding the door open or shut against everyone else. Now, there's an immediate transfer that takes place here. So the Portuguese 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they drag the naval tech, had it been low enough, up to within 5 spaces of them. And likewise, the Turks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will be pulling the Islamic technology up. That's kind of bad news for them. We also have checked the turn. On this turn, nothing increases. Next turn, Latin technology will automatically advance a space, even if nobody increases it by other means. Technology tends to move pretty quickly early in the game. People have a pile of money in this first turn or two. Money becomes scarce later, and the technology becomes harder to grow. Eventually, it comes to the point where quite often the technology is getting forced by the events rather than the players themselves. So Frederick the Great comes in and he changes the military technology rather significantly. Some powers eventually will get the money to be able to consistently keep investing in technology, but it's often quite hard because you want to keep your economic engine going. This is a game more about economics than anything else as far as I can tell, because if you fall behind and can't produce the money that you need, you can't build the armies that you need, you can't do the diplomacy you need. All this stuff that you want to do takes cash, including improving your economy. And it kind of snowballs. You got to be real careful. Of course, you could get lucky and get a pile of cash. Forgot some things like Spain gets $50 from the papacy. I had to add that in. There's a lot of little things that are really easy to forget. Once you've got them down on paper, though, and you're doing it every turn, it becomes a lot easier, because then you're just keeping track of the modifications. So assuming I got everything right, big assumption, although it's all written down here in the scenario setup, but assuming I got everything right, it should be easy to keep the updates going. Let's see. I haven't yet done one more thing. The Netherlands has a roll each turn to see how much extra fleets they get. Now they get, it's on this little table here, 6. They're going to get 2 levels of fleets. They, I believe, must put, 1 out of every 3 in the Mediterranean, but they only got 2, so they're allowed to place them upgrading the non-Mediterranean fleets. And there's something that I don't have on the board, and it doesn't really matter because the Dutch aren't really in the game, and it doesn't affect anything yet. But there's essentially a trade center in Flanders, which, if the Dutch were in the game, would be producing income for them. It does not produce it for Spain, though, which is kind of a weird situation. It's the trade for the non-Mediterranean world. Basically, whoever has the most fleets in the rest of the world. Right now, that's the Dutch, and they're getting the money. It's not being taxed. Now, the Spanish have the right to basically, I think, haul $50 a turn in from the Dutch. But by doing so, they bring the Dutch revolt closer into play, and that's a problem that they really don't want to have if they don't need to. The Spanish have a decent amount of money. Yeah, sure, you can always use more, but there are limits to what you can do. I don't know if I touched on this too much. I think I did kind of, but you only have so many manufactories you can have. And Spain's already kind of close to that. Yeah, they could up one more counter or whatever. But, you know, it doesn't bring that much extra money in a turn. It brings maybe $10 extra a turn. So, it's more important that you get all your colonies placed and stuff like that. There's also a limit. You can only do one technology action. You can't do both of them. You can only do one of DTI, FTI. All kinds of little limitations like that. There's so many trading fleets that you can try to place. A lot of stuff here. I've paid a lot of attention to this in this video because this is really the core engine of the game. It's making that money. Yeah, there's a lot of other interesting things. And the events are, I don't know. There's so many core engines when it comes to it, but this is so key to running, you know, to the decisions that you can make that have a real influence on your game. The biggest one is where you put your money, what you invest in, and whether it's armies because you have to. And by the way, the French, I believe, built up their army. That was their big investment, technology and more troops. They're planning on going to war very soon. And that's a viable option. But where you put your money is really key in this game. And the tendency for me is to stick my money where it'll make more money, because money's important, right? Yeah, but it's important not to get overrun and not to lose wars as well. People are also saving money in order to do investment in their stability, which you want to keep high because you make more money. So, for example, poor Venice only gets, what, 2/3 of their cash, whereas these guys get 10% bonus. Another thing I forgot on the sheet, but I ended up catching up, 3 slaves exported from the Portuguese colonies. That gets tracked. They made $6 off that. That increases the number of slaves, though, that are being added to Europe. There's 6 base, 3 extra get sent in. All right. I think. Maybe I've got the numbers wrong. I don't rightly remember. I think I got them right. We got 6 here, but they don't get them all. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there's 6 automatic. Okay. And because the economics is so important on this sucker, and because you're tracking all these things and everything, I kind of laugh when I hear people talk about a game being spreadsheety, and I don't see a spreadsheet. You know, early on in gaming, we saw things like Stellar Conquest down here, and a lot of other games, Conquistador included, which is one of the progenitors of this, took that kind of, hey, you got to do all these calculations and figure out how much money you make, etc. And this one takes it to an extreme that I have not seen in many games. This probably has the most complex and detailed economic system. For example, something I didn't touch on, but when you want to figure out your foreign and domestic trades, well, you have a certain number of provinces you own, right? So Spain, you count up all their provinces, that's a certain amount. You combine that amount to their trade index and get a value, and that's how much money they make. Okay, great. For foreign trade, you subtract the domestic trade value, and you subtract any countries you're at war from that total to get your base. So you have, like, I don't remember what the base is. I think, yeah, it's 1,500 to begin with. It goes up when the U.S. enters the game. And then you subtract your provinces from that and compare your FTI to that. So, you know, there's all these little things that, yeah, they're there. And, you know, you've got to cope with them. When you go to war with someone, your foreign trade index changes when somebody denies you trade, whatever. At the same time, there's also victory points that get gained for things in a similar sort of way. So you're going to have to, at the end of the turn, count all the monopolies you have. You also get bonus points for setting up colonies and all this. This is all stuff that I don't really remember. I've got to look it up. After the first couple of turns, it goes a lot easier. But I want to share some of my pain with you, especially since so many of you voted for me to put this game up. Nah, I love the game, and I'm really, I'm falling for it again in the sense that it was really tough to get started on it, but this is one of my all-time favorites. All right, up this one goes.